Yes. Then he is not there. Just unmute. Good afternoon, sir. Afternoon, sir. Right. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, good afternoon, good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, Dr. Kaur. How are you?
All good. How are you?
Fine, thank you so much, sir. Sir, actually, I just wanted to thank you for being with us today and accepting our invitation. With the busy schedule that you have, I know it's a tight packed schedule and you could not make it offline, but someday I hope that you will be able to come to our campus to deliver, you know, some amount of whatever work you do, because your work is just great. So I hope in future you will be able to make it to St. Xavier's. So, sir, with your permission, I'm handing the session over to my colleague, Dr. Ruby Mary Knox, who will be taking the session forward. Thank you, sir.
Incidentally, I have just been to St. Xavier's not even 1 year back.
Oh, really, sir? St. Xavier's University or St. Xavier's campus here?
St. Xavier's University.
University. Okay, sir, you please come over to St. Xavier's College once, Park Street.
Yeah. I've been there also.
Okay.
Been there also a couple of times, but that was a long back. But the university I visited very recently.
Okay. So, sir, handing over the session to Dr. Ruby Mary Knox so that we can start our session, sir.
Sure. Please, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
A very good afternoon to our most esteemed resource person, faculty members, paper presenters, research scholars, our dear students, support staff members, and all present here. We warmly welcome all of you to this plenary session of the ICCEEM 2025, organized by the Postgraduate and Research Department of Commerce and the Department of Management Studies in collaboration with the Internal Quality Assurance Cell, IQAC, St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. It is our utmost privilege to have this plenary session to be taken forward and delivered by our most distinguished and erudite resource person, Dr. Arpan Kumar Kaur. Sir, with your permission, a few lines of introduction. Dr. Kaur is a professor in information systems at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, India. At IIT Delhi, Sir holds the A.S. Gupta Endowed Chair Professorship in Data and Decision Science. Administratively, Sir chairs the Corporate Relations, member of the Advisory Committee for the Overall Curriculum Development Cell of IIT. He also supports multiple government ministries and other universities in different boards and advisory committees like XLRI, Symbiosis International University, amongst the rest. He works in adoption, usage, user experience, and impacts of emerging information technologies using computationally intensive theory building methods involving ML. Sir has authored over 200 publications in ABDC A category journals, Web of Science journals, and other journals of repute. As of 2024, Sir's research has been cited over 15,000 times with an H index of 57. He is the editor of various journals listed in the ABDC A category and Elsevier journals. He has undertaken over 50 sponsored research, advocacy, and training projects, which has generated over 300 million rupees. He has received the Research Excellence Award by Clarivate Analytics in 2021 for the highest individual Web of Science citation for the duration 2015-2020 in India. It is indeed an honor, sir, to have you amongst us this afternoon, and we are sure this session is truly going to be a value addition for each one of us here today. Without any further ado, we request you, sir, to take the session forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll try to, share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm also not familiar with this, new platform Zoho so much. I hope my screen is visible.
Sir, not yet. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's come through now. Yes, sir.
It is visible? Okay,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm not so familiar with this platform Zoho. Most of the times we use Teams or Zoom. So I'll share a little bit about the perspective that I had for delivering this talk. First of all, really a lot of thanks for inviting me today for this plenary session to St. Xavier's and St. Xavier's, the Jesuit community for St. Xavier's, and where I did my master's PhD in XLRI. It's the same community, and I go long back with that community for various reasons. But and I've also visited St. Xavier's, the university, and also St. Xavier's College long back. Although St. Xavier's College was long back, maybe 2 decades back when I was appearing for my CAT examination. I'm talking about 2 decades back, but I still visited St. Xavier's College, and that still rings a very nice memory, in my mind. So thanks a lot for today inviting me and, sharing this opportunity to present a little bit about my research. And today what I'm going to talk about is theory building using AI in management. And this is based on, a couple of editorials that I had authored earlier, in different journals, and also based on some of the editorials that has been written in more reputed journals like FT50 journals, and this has been kind of discourse across management disciplines. But since I'm coming in from information systems area, the examples and the citations I've made here are all based on information systems journal, but similar thought process have been echoed in adaptive theory building in Journal of Management. Then similarly, such things have come in marketing science. So it's not something that is only restricted to information systems as a discipline, but has been echoed across disciplines and has been extremely important in recent times. So when we talk of this space of using AI in management, what I've seen is there has been a huge number of focus today that how AI is transforming many things, including education in our system. So when we talk of today AI coming in new way, there are different models of AI that has come in. Of course, it goes with traditional models to the newer models like generative AI and federated learning and so on. But what we're talking about using AI covers many aspects of AI, a lot to do with unstructured data which can be analyzed, and typically we call that as big data. How we can use AI for big data and build theories in management. So some of these, like we have done, for my past role, I'm no longer editor in this journal, and this is basically one of the research papers which I'll talk about. And these are other research papers which I've also kind of talked about. And these are, of course, very, very highly reputed journals, whether it is MISQ or ISR, very, very highly reputed. And they have also talked about how to build, data using computationally intensive theory building approaches. So this area is broadly called as, computational theory building for social sciences. So when we look at this particular area, what has happened is that when we look at all around us, when we started this journey of management research, maybe 20 years back, 30 years back, when this discipline started gaining a separate identity of its own, there was a huge challenge of getting data. And most of the researchers would struggle in terms of building a theory, trying to figure out how to search for data, how to get organizational data, how to get users' data. But what has happened is, ever since internet ecosystem blossomed in the last decade, we have had different platforms, whether it is platforms like Reddit, whether it is platforms like social media like Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, to be very specific, because there has been so much of data based analysis using Twitter data, and there has been different platforms like for example Google Play Store, where you have app reviews, and then e-commerce platforms. All of these digital platforms, digital ecosystem basically led to a huge splurge in access to data, which was not earlier accessible. So what happened was, a lot of people who had a little bit of computational resources, and by resources, what I mean is, they had one, the knowledge of, little bit of knowledge of machine learning and big data analytics. The other part was they had little bit of access to the data. So what happened, there was this huge splurge of big data driven research, because the data was accessible, and this started around 2010, 12, around that time. And what it led to was that, because we had data, we could just capture the data, we could just pull out the data, and then there was very less attempt to really build theory out of that data. So we have data, we have got access to data. There are so many different online platforms. Even like, for example, there are open access journals like this, like Data in Brief is a journal from Elsevier side, which has got very nice collation of data. So earlier people struggled because they did not have data, and when these platforms, then KDD, all these platforms started coming in, because there was access to data, it suddenly led to a splurge of research, where people could use different kind of some of these machines and tools, machine learning languages and tools, and then there was a lot of big data driven research. What happened in that journey was that there was a loss of focus in theory building attempt in many of the management and social sciences research that happened, which typically lacked any element of generalizability, although the data was really huge. And huge data means that the data would be really generalizable. But there was a problem of generalizability, because the data was very restricted to a different context. And there was no causal explanations that can be, kind of derived from the data or from the studies for that. So it was very few, easily falsifiable, and does not really kind of explain any phenomena which holds, a test of time, cannot explain the phenomena over a period of time. So what I'm trying to explain is more about how we can move from what is there in the data towards why we try to explain any phenomena in a particular way. And this basically is a kind of research agenda that has been echoed over a period of time, because most of these journals had started looking at how we can build the data, how we can build upon the data to derive a theoretical nuance. So when we start this journey, because today we are also talking of many of the ranking schemas for trying to understand the contribution of individual institutions, and all these journal rankings, all these institutions typically look for what kind of research you have, what kind of quality of publication you have. and whether those publications are going to be very impactful or not. I suddenly see a black screen. Hello, hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. It's a blank screen. So right now it's what's a theoretical contribution. Now it's blank.
Okay. Okay, I think there was some kind of a. Is it visible? Yeah, my
Yes, sir.
entire
Your entire
screen got black. Yeah. Screen is visible?
Your screen is visible, but not the presentation.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is this fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay. So because we had this, dearth of, high quality publications which were coming out, most of it was becoming kind of replicated research that we started pulling out, material, we started pulling out data, run some of these tools, and then report just what the tools used to, kind of give using some visualization. So what was lost was, we lost some of the essential targets that management research needed to, kind of replicate. So, of course, if you have to revisit the targets, a topic must be timely, relevant, novel, and typically when you are submitting a paper in any recent journals, the journals would kind of try to understand whether the topic is today relevant or should be taken forward for the review process based on three different perspectives: generalizability, rigor, and relevance. But what started happening was that there was a lot of deliberation, like what exactly is a good generalizable contribution, what exactly is high rigorous methodology, what exactly is the relevance of the contribution for the audience that we are targeting. And this is where I see that a lot of struggle is happening, whether it is my own PhD scholars who are trying to do their research, or whether as an editor or as a reviewer, when I look at submissions which are sent to me, all of them typically have many of these struggles. So a lot of times we get desk rejects, and I also get desk reject, but we get this desk reject that depending on the publication that we're trying to target and crack, a good study needs to have a good theoretical contribution, but then we often do not have that theoretical contribution built up. So what I'm going to talk about is somewhat using AI. And when we are using AI for theoretical contribution, we are using some kind of data analysis using AI, which helps to build that theoretical contribution. So what has happened is, in recent times, if you look at how do we define a theoretical contribution? So when we try to talk of a theory, first of all, a theory should have uniqueness, parsimony, and generalizability. And along with that, these three are very, core essence of a good theory, which will explain a phenomena. And along with that, we should have very decent amount of, reproducibility, falsifiability, internal consistency, and it should stand the test of time. And these are good to have factors when we are picking up a theoretical model and saying that we should try to say something about the theory. And when we are using this AI-based theory building, a lot of times there is this contribution dilemma that whether we are contributing algorithmically or whether we are contributing in the theory itself or the domain itself. A detailed look is required in that context. So for people who are trying to make a methodological or an algorithmic contribution, because in management we have people who are coming in from, say, a discipline of core machine learning, or they're coming with a discipline of core operational research. And their contribution is, of course, a lot of times very methodological. We are not talking of methodological contribution, which is kind of developing a new algorithm, then experimental and cross-validation of that algorithm with benchmarking with other relative similar algorithms, and then making a mathematical validation or making some kind of a proposition that this algorithm is better in this context under these boundary conditions. We are not talking about when we are trying to create a methodological contribution. If it is not a methodological contribution, then typically what happens is we are contributing in terms of the discipline, or we are contributing in the theory. And my talk is more towards theoretical contribution, where we are trying to explain new linkages between theories. We are trying to explain, how a certain phenomena can be explained a little better. And a phenomena is captured in any kind of a theoretical model. If we talk of a statistical model, then it is typically like in a regression-based model, it's typically the dependent variable that we are trying to measure. And then the dependent variable is also explained using some independent variable. So the independent variables are the antecedents with which you are able to explain that dependent variable. So a theoretical contribution is often a combination of trying to figure out or consequences of any construct which is operationalized, and these are operationalized using some big database methods. Of course, you have the traditional or the survey-based methods, experiments, many other methods are there. We're just trying to talk about big database methods where you are using AI for computational theory building. So typically, what we are looking for is, if it is something about information system, then there is an interaction with an IT artifact. For other disciplines, there will be similar such definitions and boundary conditions when you're using a big database study. So if you have to understand theory, we have to understand that just data and its description is not a theoretical contribution, and literature by itself is not theoretical contribution. But this helps to build theory. And in case of information systems, typically what we say is it is like addressing the design of an information system, the adoption of an information system, the appropriation or the nature of use of an information system, the impact of an information system, or the interaction of ICT artifacts. Typically that is called as an information system discipline. But then it can be for marketing that this definition would be changing, but you are trying to talk about different other scope based on the core discipline that you're trying to build the theory in. You're just borrowing the methods and the algorithms from AI and ML using big data as a mechanism to think that may be related to a domain or a discipline. It could be socio-political, it could be behavioral, it could be structural or ontological, or even epistemological questions. So when we are analyzing that, we have to think in consideration that these questions, if it is interaction, if it is user behavior, this we are typically trying to study either an individual and their behavior. That individual and their behavior might be in the context of an organization, or it could be in context of a society where the unit of analysis is a societal or a group, or it could be much larger in terms of even a polity. But typically what we are trying to do is we are trying to kind of understand the behavior of mostly individuals or groups. And we are kind of trying to extend a theoretical lens to either extend existing knowledge or to contradict existing knowledge. So that's typically how we try to define a contribution and the novelty of the contribution. It is important to understand that when we look at past literature, and there was this very nice paper which I studied when I was doing my PhD, What Theory is Not. And then there were lots of relative literature which came out adding to the debate, what theory is not, theorizing is. And then there were lots of these papers of how to set a hook, how to build a literature paper, how to build any kind of research paper from Academy of Management, AMR, and their editors. And mostly those editorials had debated and then also kind of agreed on few elements that adding references on a theory, data and its description is not a theoretical contribution. list of variables or constructs are not a theoretical contribution, and visualization or imagery is not a theoretical contribution. And that keeps us in a very large fix, that we know that what is not theoretical contribution, but we are not very sure of what constitutes a theory. We have been told what is not theory, but then these are the elements that we use for any research. And there is already a lot of no's to tell us that it is not a theoretical contribution, but nothing really explicitly tells us what exactly theory is. And this is where a lot of soul searching and deliberation is needed when we are deliberating about it, because whenever we are using computational theory building, there are lots of this discussion, and like, for example, people like Varun Grover, Adam, Lindbergh, Isaac Ben Bassett, they had all discussed about the perils and promises of big data-driven research. This was an editorial that came out in 2020, that big data-driven research will try to explicitly address very tactical problems and cannot be generalizable. For example, when we have the data and we are using AI to summarize the data and say that, okay, if you say it's organizational data and we have got all the orders from Zomato, and then we mine that data from all the orders of Zomato and say that, okay, on Tuesday, people order more, or on Friday, people order more in Zomato anyways. So if on Friday, people order more food from Zomato, there is no need to give a discount on Friday. So that is typically a tactical problem which may help Swiggy or Zomato, that most of the orders which happen on Friday, and irrespective of the discount, it will not really make business sense for Zomato to give discounts on those days, but allow discounts on other days. That's a very tactical answer. It may help, Zomato or Swiggy. It may not really help theorizing, or it may not help theory building. So what we need to understand is what exactly is theory building, so that we can understand explaining a phenomena in such a way that it is more applicable, it is abstractable, and it leads to more of causal research. But what has been seen is that big data-driven research typically a lot of times will have references, will have a lot of literature review, but then it does not have a real depth treatment of theory and focuses more on the data and the methods. So a lot of times, in case of information system, what happened was there was a nominal treatment of the IT artifact, but across discipline, there has been, kind of a reduced focus on what constitutes the core theoretical hook or the core theory with which you're trying to explain a phenomena. And of course, there are studies which used it, but they were only looking at more replicative research in the process. Other things that there has been more deliberations on, like, do we need to know the world, understand it? So big data research is often, in many published papers, more about predicting something rather than explanation and causality. So management research, on the other hand, when we look at a discipline, is all about explainability, is all about causality. We have historical data and it is subject to different biases, but when we are analyzing that historical data, what happens is, based on the access and the biases with which we have collected the data, the interpretations are typically done. But we are not trying to create interpretation which can be abstracted to create more knowledge. And this is where basically big data-driven research has been criticized quite a bit. So what is needed? So what has happened was, in 2019, 2020, there has been some editorials which started coming in, and like in 2022, Miranda and Nick Berente, their editorial in MIS Quarterly came out. They started talking about how can we build deductive to inductive theory building, trying to understand how we are collecting the big data using some sampling mechanism From the big data, we try to understand some elements of the patterns. So now this has become very easy. Earlier, this was relatively more difficult, say 4 or 5 years back. Now this has become very easy because now you have GenAI, you throw the data in GenAI tools and it starts abstracting the data and then giving you certain themes and the main, patterns within those themes. So what is important is when we are using these big data driven research or we are using AI for this research, we should be able to understand that pattern surfacing can lead to theorizing, but pattern surfacing itself is not theorizing. So the pattern surfacing, what happens is it leads to identification of theoretical lexicons. And by theoretical lexicons, what I mean is these are kind of representative of new constructs potentially that the data may show you. And from this new construct, we may be able to kind of break into other constructs and find out relationships, which probably was not targeted or struggled to or had not been really explored in early times. So what started happening was we started looking at different kinds of big data driven research, different kinds of research questions which could potentially be delivered or identified now. Because first of all, this trace data which we are mining now, this trace data is giving us a kind of truth. It is not really kind of accessible. It is not something that has been collected. Like, for example, when you're filling up a survey, the person filling up a survey knows that his responses are going to be analyzed. If you're going for an interview mechanism, the person being interviewed, he knows that, his interview responses are going to be analyzed. But in comparison, if it is, something that is, kind of captured using big data, what happens is the interaction and the footprints in the internet are actually having all this trace data generated. And we are kind of analyzing the moments of truth, honest signals from the people who are being studied. So it is not that they are responding to questions and therefore they have some kind of biases how they would want to favor or disfavor certain principles or moral principles, but it goes beyond moral principles or values which they have when they try to respond to such questionnaires or when they have any kind of interviews. But their honest signals are captured from them, and we are able to kind of mine that honest signal from different stakeholders. So when we are trying to do that, we have to understand that we are building upon just one tool, which is big data analytics or AI-based tools for trying to build a theoretical model. And that is very iterative in nature. So we start with understanding of theoretical models or theoretical lenses in social sciences. We have to also identify the core of the discipline that we are belonging to. And this is a problem that I've seen many research, that there is no core. Whether we are from marketing, whether we are from information systems, whether we are from operations management, but every discipline has got a core. We can borrow somewhat from related disciplines, but we need to have that core, because based on the core, we select the journals. If it is completely interdisciplinary, there are, of course, journals like Journal of Management or Journal of Business Research, which will be very, very interdisciplinary. But most of the times when we target journals which is belonging to a particular discipline and not very interdisciplinary. So if it is targeting a particular discipline, we need to identify a core literature and a theory that replicates or reflects upon that core. And then we start building upon those literature and try to understand like whether these are able to, kind of build upon this literature and extend something new in this. So what we try to do is we start with identifying the research questions. The research questions should be broad enough to generate interest, but it is also specific enough that it can be validated objectively. And this is a little bit tricky. So typically, it is good to have 2-3 generative, general questions, but not beyond that. So I would typically say that if somebody is building the research question, the first question could be, through a particular lens, what are the most important factors that explain a phenomena? And then subsequent question could be, how do these factors explain the phenomena? That is typically how you try to generate the research questions when you're trying to ideate both on theory building and as well as the validation of the problem. So when we are thinking of the research methodology will have to create mechanisms for data collection, data sampling, which will try to ensure the replicability of the research, how we can ensure that the research is having, objectivity in terms of identifying sample. And that typically comes because we have thought of how we are collecting the data. So sampling is something very, very important. But a lot of times we do not really think much about the sampling strategies when we are considering any kind of, research studies in this context of AI-based research. But it is important to note that we should have a very rigorous sampling methodology whenever we are trying to talk about any kind of big data-driven research. And when we are trying to build this big data-driven research, we need to have mechanisms of establishing things like reliability. It could be intercoder reliability, it could be categorical reliability, that whatever we are trying to measure actually is measuring that or not. We need to have mechanisms of validity, whether it is phase validity, concept validity. We can use text mining, natural language processing, network science, any kind of machine learning. And then we try to move towards, some kind of an econometric analysis, which helps to move beyond association and or simple correlation. That's what typically we need to think of the research methodology. And when we are using this big data driven methods, we often are using descriptive analysis of data. We use topic modeling, we do text mining, create word clouds, create network modeling, community detection. Sometimes a lot of these are also used in literature review when you're doing bibliographic or bibliometric analysis. But again, it is important to know that just the visualization is not the findings of the research, but what is really the contribution is if we can identify constructs from literature and we can create mechanisms to build bridges among these constructs in a way that has not been ideated earlier. So we build and borrow theory from related disciplines, we borrow constructs from your core disciplines, and we try to kind of build those bridges which help in explaining the phenomena a little bit better through a theoretical lens. So model validation will have a lot more of statistical analysis, whether it is using simple analysis like t-test or ANOVA, or it could be, more deeper analysis, whether it is, I would not really go for SEM-based analysis, but then path analysis sometimes can be done on big data-driven research. Today, there are lots of discussions surrounding configurational analysis, or typically you can go for econometric models, whether it is like, something like, say, ridge regression, lasso regression, or other econometric models, which will have mechanisms to understand how important some of the factors which explain the dependent variable, how important their role is in terms of dependent variables. So when we are doing this research, sometimes we can have mixed research methods. One part is, say, we are using big data driven studies for theory building. And the other part could be that we are either doing a qualitative study sometimes, or even undertaking a survey and then combining both the big data driven study and the survey study to make the model, to make our study much more holistic, much more bulletproof in that case. So that triangulation, attempt for triangulation also helps quite a bit. So when we are starting, we have to ideate about data acquisition, how we are translating the data, transforming the data, that is data conversion. And then comes the AI block, where we can use text mining or natural language processing. We can use generative AI, we can use network mining, we can use image mining. And then we are able to identify certain factors together. And then using those factors, we can build upon theory. We can try to identify constructs. And then we can build upon some theoretical model will say that A, B, C are the factors which explains the phenomena which is captured through a construct D. So A and B, A, B, and C are, antecedents of D. And we try to build that model using an econometric model. So when we are doing that, we are basically talking about big data driven research, where how A, B, and C constructs are being measured, or the construct, the dependent variable D is being measured, that is using a lot of these AI models. Now comes the other question, is this research really inductive? Is it really that all these things are coming through the data, or is it also that these studies can be deductive in nature? So big data driven research can also be deductive, can also be inductive. And we had written a couple of editorials surrounding that. When we talk of deductive theory building in big data studies, we are theorizing about theoretical lexicons. And these theoretical lexicons, we are identifying, we are building a theoretical model. And we identify there are some gaps in the existing literature. And based on the gaps in existing literature, we try to initiate, that we are going to study XYZ phenomena in a particular way. So the data sampling has to accommodate that theoretical focus from the very beginning. So when we're collecting the data in terms of platform selection, the data acquisition, the sampling, the search strings, how we are cleaning the data, how we are removing unnecessary data from that entire set of large data, all those need to accommodate in a theoretical exploration when we're looking for a deductive theory building. So deductive theory building has a lot more focus on how we can remove unwanted data from the data sampling process, so that when we are going for the model generation and the model validation, where we are using text mining, network mining, image mining, and so on, and building that econometric model, what data goes into the big data analytics method that is already very much cleaned. So in a deductive model, we have already identified that, okay, these are the constructs that we are trying to study. This is the theoretical lens with which I'm trying to look at the phenomena. So when we are collecting the data, if you're collecting, say, 1 million tweets or 1 million reviews, we need to take a small sample of that, maybe 1 lakh out of that, 100,000 sample out of that 1 million, where basically we have a selection mechanism based on the theoretical hook that we are trying to use for analyzing that data. All the remaining data needs to be removed. And then that smaller subset, the smaller sample of the data, goes for the big data analysis using text mining, network mining, image mining, video mining, whatever that is. And then we try to build a theoretical model using some econometric approach. Then this is basically a deductive approach in big data driven studies. We have already identified the theory. We have already, kind of defined the hypothesis that we are trying to understand, or the propositions we want to understand. Those hypotheses and proposition would guide us in terms of the data sampling strategy, where the focus is removing the noise from the data. And then we reach to, say, stage 2 with a much smaller data set, with which we are just focusing on specifics of the data, where we are able to understand the relationship, because the entire data might have a lot more information, and we are not really looking for all those information. We're looking at very, very limited amount of information, which will try to explain our theory context. On the other side, if you look at inductive theory building, what happens is we start with pattern surfacing. So we collect data based on a phenomena. Say the phenomena is now that the elections are going on. Say the phenomena is how people have voting preferences in election, or things like say voting preferences are there, but how they change, how they polarize, how they evolve. And if we are trying to understand that, we try to get a sense of all the discussions which are happening surrounding elections. And that is basically pattern surfacing, because there would be a huge context of discussion which are happening. Now, from that pattern surfacing, we try to do an iterative theory building process in which we try to identify certain theoretical lexicons. So it is kind of abductive research, and we are trying to kind of identify potential theoretical lexicons, and then we will zero down to few theoretical lexicons which is of interest. So what happens is, in pattern surfacing, we would try to look for all possible different theoretical lexicons from the big data, and there may be 20, 30, 40 different theoretical lexicons which are emerging from the exploratory study. But what we do is, after that exploratory study, we try to zero down on few theoretical lexicons depending on the theoretical hook that we have, and then subsequently, using the theoretical hook, we basically try to validate the relationship among the model using an econometric analysis. So first part is an exploratory study in an inductive theory building. This is followed by a confirmatory study, which is typically the model validation, and then an econometric model. So most of my research is typically in the second part, where we try to look at inductive theory building, and I would try to kind of look at a larger context of data. And from there, I would try to figure out, okay, this is my theoretical lens. And with this theoretical lens, I'm able to figure out these are the constructs which are explored. And I try to build a relationship within those constructs. In the previous deductive theory, I've also done some research where, like, if I'm mining certain things in images, for example, there is one of my scholars who is now in Copenhagen Business School. In her dissertation, what she did was she mined some signals from images, and we were trying to establish what do those signals mean with, the reception those images have on social media. So do those signals in the images, like if a person is smiling, if a person's face is visible, or say if there are brand logos present in the images that are posted in, say, Facebook, do consumers of the brand or the followers of that brand in Facebook react very differently when they see these things? So there we have already identified what is the context of the study and what we're trying to measure. Here, what we're trying to measure evolves after we do the exploratory study, and then subsequently the model is built. In one, the model and the focus of the model is already predetermined. In the current one, in the inductive approach, we develop that these are the constructs that we are trying to study, and this is the constructs which will build the model based on exploratory study at the beginning, which is followed by the confirmatory study. So we need to have awareness of different methods. Like, for example, long back in 2017, we published a paper in Informs. In Informs, we published like what constitutes, some of these metrics which we can measure if we are analyzing social media data, whether it is if we are capturing something like Twitter, whether it is Facebook data. What are the metrics we can typically get out of these social media data? And there are many more metrics. At that time, space-time analytics was not so popular. So at that time, we focused on descriptive analytics, content analytics, and network analytics, which were possible to kind of develop from social media data. But now space-time analytics is also coming out very largely, and there is a lot more mechanism to understand that over a period of time. So after we use these methods, what we need to understand is, we are going to build a model that will convert some of this data into numerical values for the constructs, and then subsequently we'll try to use an econometric model or a path model, or we'll try to even say a simple ANOVA kind of a thing, or a t-test, and say that, okay, these things are going to be different. These, for the two groups that we are studying, there is significant differences of what we are capturing, and Sometimes we use linear methods. When we are using linear methods, we try to typically use regression-based analysis. And sometimes we often use nonlinear methods. So linear methods or regression-based analysis or econometric analysis have explainability, but nonlinear methods have better predictability. Like if you use a machine learning model like neural network, it will have higher predictability, but you cannot really explain which factors are more important, which factors do not have any importance statistically. We cannot explain that. So there is always a trade-off of explainability versus predictability. And in management research, most of the time we try to give higher preferences to move towards causal research. So we move beyond association to causality, although claims can be tricky, but we try to move towards causality by using some of the linear methods. And by linear method, what I mean is we try to go using some lasso or ridge regression, those kind of methods. And we have done that in many of our publications, say in industrial marketing management. We try to understand chatbot experience of users. So we use lasso and ridge regression. Some of our other studies also have used that. So then what we're trying to do is we are trying to move towards causal research, although claims can be tricky using many of these things because not much of controls can be kept. But using appropriate controls, we can move towards a little bit of causal claims. So when we are trying to do this research, what happens is after we do the text mining, we can build econometric model, regressional analysis, or even configurational analysis, and then try to bring out very nice explanation. Now, what becomes a little tricky is when we are doing all this analysis, it is often very challenging that how do we structure a paper? And this is one problem that a lot of times my PhD scholars would come to me saying that we did so much of work, how do I fit all of these into 10,000 words or even 8,000 or 9,000 words sometimes, depending on the journal. And this is quite tricky because article structuring, the flow, these become very difficult. The introduction and the literature review is the part that is relatively straightforward. But then when we're trying to do the theory development, the research design, the results, it becomes a little complex because sometimes we may have an iterative process of deliberating, depending on the research question, deliberating and then bringing out an exploratory study, a confirmatory study, and then structuring out the entire principles. Structuring out the entire findings, bringing them out, having the theory development section. Where do we develop the hypothesis? Where do we develop the propositions? This becomes very, very tricky. And sometimes, we think of it in a particular perspective, and then reviewers may have a very contrasting perspective. They may say that, okay, it makes no sense what you're talking about. And this is where we need to have a little bit of deep thinking in terms of whether our study is inductive, whether our study is deductive. If it is a deductive study, then we can directly jump into theory development, create the propositions or hypotheses, then have the research methodology and design, and then directly go to the results. But if a study is more inductive in nature, what we need to do is, after the literature review, we probably would need first a research design section where we say that this is where, sequence-wise we'll be doing XYZ activities so that we are able to explain what study 1 does, study 2 does, study 3 does, and so on. And then we start with our exploratory study. And then from the exploratory study, we may move on to the next part, which can be a explanatory study, or it can be, say, a confirmatory study, depending on the approach that we are taking. So the first part is basically the exploratory study, where we are doing a pattern surfacing in essence. And then the second part would be, we can have an exploratory to a confirmatory study, or we can have an explanatory study, depending on what kind of methodology we are using. Explanatory study can be if you're doing an ethnography study or an interview or uh, any kind of quali method, or if it is a quanti method kind of a thing, then we call that as a confirmatory study. But with exploratory study followed by this quantitative study or this explanatory study, and then we present the results. So the exploratory study has got its own set of results. The confirmatory study or the explanatory study has its own set of results. And then we carve out the discussion where we create a meta synthesis and then present how we are actually contributing back to literature. And then we are able to explain the conclusion and then present the selective references that we have. But this is where a lot of nuanced thought process comes into the picture in trying to understand like how we are structuring the article, how can we, kind of explain what is the methodology, how we have built upon the methodology to explain the phenomena really, really well, and how is our theory development really explaining that phenomena. So this article structuring is often very, tricky, because sometimes even for me, like when I'm thinking of it in a particular way, it appears that it should be positioned in a particular manner. But then when I read it after 2 months, 3 months, I think that whatever I've done would not make sense. Maybe I need to revisit the article structuring a lot of times. So at every stage, we need to deliberate upon few things. And there has been this article which was on what were methodological solutions, how we talk of theoretical research questions, how we can handle outliers in data better. So this entire article typically was brought in I think this Journal of Management Reviews, no, Journal of Management Studies, sorry, JMS. And there are very nice explanation given, although it is not about big data driven methods, but then the same applies to big data driven research also, that how we can focus on talking something, thinking of something surrounding the validity of measures, how we can improve the reliability of measures, how we can understand the data limitations from a single type of data, how we can address data measurement related challenges and have problems addressed surrounding internal and external validity of research models. All of these things we need to take into consideration whenever we are trying to build our research, whenever we are trying to plan and execute our research. So these are elements which have been brought out in JMS by editors, and this is something I felt is very, very useful when I'm thinking from my research point of view. So selective references, like I talked about, there have been many such papers which have tried to, and I've given some examples of my papers which have tried to do theory building. And I've also talked about some of the other papers which have kind of used, and I have also built upon their ideas, their concepts, which talks about how to build theory, what it means in computationally intensive theory construction, what does it really mean, and how do we build upon these theoretical blocks. So I have learned from these papers, and I've tried to pen my thoughts in many of these talks, many of these editorials as well. And many application of these principles I have also listed out here. Of course, some of these are little dated, but I have continued to publish more and more papers in recent times also using similar approaches. And there are many such examples. If anybody want any specific things, I have published in recent times, which is something on metaverse, something's on how we can mine e-commerce related data, and then trying to figure out things like whether there is a challenge in terms of supply chain disruption and so on. So it depends on whatever research questions you have, but there are many papers which have tried to address both deductive and inductive theory building in big data driven computational social science kind of research. So with this, I'll stop. And I've been told that my talk is for 1 hour. It is now 3:59. So I'm handing it over to anybody who has any questions to ask, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, sir. As sir has mentioned, he has opened it up to the questions from any student or any participants present here.
So in case there are any queries or any questions that would like to be addressed to sir, we could have them now. Sir, I don't think there are any questions per se. Like there's no one coming up with any questions as such.
Okay, okay, okay.
So with your permission, there's just one announcement I need to make.
Sure, sure.
Thank you, sir. For the participants who are present here in the meeting, this is for you. Please listen to this carefully. There has been there's a feedback link which is posted on the group.
With your permission, there is one announcement I need to make.
Sure, sure.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. I think you were saying something in
Yes, sir.
between. I think
Yes, sir. There was an echo. Yes, sir. All right. So
Yeah,
participants.
please, you can continue. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So participants, there's a feedback link that has been posted in the chat box that you can find on your on the top of your screens. So kindly click on the feedback link and fill it up. This will ensure your participation in the plenary session and thereby adhere towards the requisite attendance format. So please ensure you all fill up the feedback form. It has been posted in the chat box. The link has been provided. Kindly ensure you fill it up. Sir, we do have 3 hands that have gone up.
Sure, sure.
Yes, sir. So we'll take up the question from Abhishek. Abhishek, you have raised your hands. Abhishek, can you unmute yourself, please? Okay. We also have Shomaraj, who has raised his hands. Shomaraj, can you unmute yourself and go ahead with your question, please? Shomaraj? Yes, Shomaraj, you have unmuted yourself.
Yes, yes. I was I was asking where the chat box is actually. I can't find it here.
It will be on the lower half of your screen where you have a message icon.
Yes, I can't find the chat box actually. It's only polls and Q&As that is appearing at the lower end of
That
my
is fine. You
screen.
can ask the question directly. That is fine. You can ask the question if you have anything. If anyone has any question, you can just ask that and I'll try to respond.
All right. Chirag, you have raised your hands. Can you pose your question to sir? Chirag? Chirag, your hands are raised. In case you want to ask your question, you may go ahead with the same. Similarly with Abhishek, for those of us who have our hands raised, you can kindly unmute yourself and go ahead with your question.
Hello.
Yes, you may go ahead.
Yes. Okay. To be very honest, like these terms were quite new for us because we are just in second year and haven't prepared a lot of papers, or like we haven't done anything related to that. But I have a question. Like, do you think that AI is going to take over these research work in future, or are we like, is it actually relevant in the future? Will people really need to do something about that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question today because there was a point of time we would think of AI, analysis using AI was a little difficult. So people who would try to undertake a computational research, they would need a background in machine learning, but that is no longer needed. So what is going to happen is AI can definitely generate a lot of patterns, but AI builds upon the patterns based on the data that you give, but it cannot theorize. That cognitive skills is unfortunately or fortunately still left with us as human beings. So what will happen is the need to theorize, where you are, you're being very innovative. You're able to think out of the box. You're able to connect back to specific literature in a way that is not earlier feasible. I think the need to theorize is going to become much, much more important. What AI will do is help in data analysis quite a bit. And this is something like, say, for example, you want to do a literature review. You undertake a search in Scopus using keywords and you pull out, say, 1,000 papers. You give it to AI, all that CSV file using 1,000 papers, and have your research questions also fed to AI. And ChatGPT can generate answers based on analysis of the abstracts of those research questions. That kind of research is going to be very easily doable by AI. But when it comes to going deeper into the theory, trying to understand construct level relationships, those kind of analysis will not be feasible using AI. So yes, if you talk of simple bibliometric analysis, it will be possible to bang out a research paper with just maybe half an hour's worth of work. But what it will not allow you to undertake is a much deeper level of conceptualization of the research and theorizing about your work. That unfortunately AI will not be able to replicate. And that is where, even if you do prompt engineering, you're very good at prompt engineering, you will still need to be very highly trained into the theory of your discipline. And theorizing will require a higher level of cognitive skills than ever before, because today AI can do remaining work, which is simple data analysis and so on. So data analysis AI is going to do much better. It is going to be much easier to do that than before. But what it requires is much more conceptual clarity of theorizing than it was needed earlier on. Hope I could answer your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Arya. We have a couple of hands up. Harsh or Abhishek, fine. Either of you could go ahead with it.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Actually, I can't find the chat box where the feedback form is given.
All right, for those of us who are still having this query, kindly refer to the Q&A section that is available. Click on the Q&A section. The link has been posted there as well.
It's not showing there also.
It is on the Q&A section, the portion where everyone has been asking their queries. There's a Q&A
Yeah,
section.
found it. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Other than the chat box related questions, Keshav, your hands are raised. Is there something you want to ask, sir?
No, actually, I wanted to know where the link has been posted.
All right. Okay. So then, are there any further questions that is addressed to sir over here? Any queries that we have that would like to be clarified by sir while we still have sir amidst us? All right, sir. I don't think there are any further questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So
With
then we
your
can conclude the session.
Yes, sir. So, sir, as we had spoken or we have mentioned this before as well, it was truly an extraordinary session, and we are honestly enthralled by the content that you have delivered, as well as the interactions, even though remote, but we did have. And thank you so much for taking time out and clarifying these doubts so meticulously. We will be leaving here today truly enriched and having a lot to look back upon and retrospect. We cannot thank you enough, sir, for being with us here today despite your busy schedule and sharing your vast knowledge with us. Thank you once again, sir, and we do look forward to seeing you in person on campus.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So, sir, with your permission, we will be ending the meeting.
Surely, surely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, students. I hope you have done the needful and you found the feedback link on the Q&A section and filled it up. So with this, we will now be wrapping up the meeting for today. Once again, thank you, sir, and thank you, students.